But to build it, we must sow investment today. Childhood and youth are the foundations of our region's future. But to build it, we must sow investment today. By providing hope through programs focused on childhood and youth, every dollar we commit now will yield lasting results for generations to come. Our region is home to approximately 255 million children and young people. About 45% face deep challenges like poverty, while many more are victims of inequality and violence that affect their lives and limit their opportunities.
Hola, muy buenas tardes.
Very good afternoon to you all. It's a real pleasure and an honor to invite you to this third annual conference on governance for development in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this has been organized by the UNDP and the CAF, the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean. We are currently we have translation into English, but we also have streaming channels so that we can reach every corner of the world. And we invite you all to get connected through the UN webcast, the CAF, and the UNDP. And we want to invite all those who are following us online to send in their remarks through our social media networks. We'd invite you to participate actively in this important conversation. Thank you all for being present. Thank you to our panelists. We know that some of you have traveled very, very far to be here, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. So let me begin by telling you about this initiative. It began in 2023 as a way of highlighting political dialogue to strengthen democracy, generate consensus, and build strategies for inclusive development that are resilient, but even more importantly, sustainable. The central theme is biodiversity and governance of critical natural resources, energy and minerals that are key, such as lithium and copper, that are essential for the energy transition and to ensure that it is fair, and also for sustainable development in the region. To launch this discussion, I have the honour of inviting Michelle Musquet, ASG of the United Nations and Regional Director of the UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean, and she will offer some opening remarks. Michelle, you have the floor. Thank you, Claudia. It's really wonderful to have you moderating two events in a row this morning. It's a very busy time here at the United Nations, and I thank you all for being here with us. I think your presence is symbolic, and this is a very interesting dialogue that we are going to be having here. Excellencies, dear friends, Christian, it's a real privilege for me to welcome you to this third meeting of our annual conference of the UNDP and the CAF on governance for development in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a series of conferences where Sergio, the president of the CAF, Christian and myself are really getting involved in where this meeting, after 3 years, is now consolidated as a frank, open, multi-stakeholder discussion about the importance of governance as a means of making progress towards our development priorities for Latin America and the Caribbean. Above all, achieving and fulfilling this potential that we have as a region to make progress with resilience and sustainability and to leave no one behind. The idea is to use these fora to highlight the policy, the right policy, and the value of dialogue as the only way of building consensus on a shared vision that we have for the future. And the topic that has brought us together today is a central one to current geopolitical dynamics, where Latin America and the Caribbean have a unique advantage, especially from the point of view of trade and growth and development. And here I'm going to pause because this opportunity forces us to ask a question. What type of development do we want? We've had a number of different experiences in the region where we have had growth, but we continue to be the most unequal region on the planet. And so we must call into question the ways in which we have achieved growth thus far, not to self-flagellate, but rather to have a shared vision for the future so that we can share these aspirations and progress. And so I would ask, how does the UNDP and the CAF see the future in this region where we have such great opportunities? We're talking about inclusive development, resilient development, and sustainable development. And the reason why the region has such unique opportunities begins perhaps with its diversity, something that we all know very well through our trajectories and through leadership in the region. We are the most biodiverse region on the planet. We have energy reserves that are uniquely clean energy reserves, and we also have not only rare minerals but critical minerals that are essential for the green transition and the technology transition, the energy transition. And we are one of the main producers of food. We have a crucial role to play in food security, not only in our region but globally. And this involves some major opportunities for growth for the region. We know also that there is a clear interdependence between our growth model and the natural world in Latin America and the Caribbean. 30% of the population depends on agriculture in one way or another in order to subsist. Some 25% of our energy matrix comes from water sources, and some 50% of exports in the region are based on or stem from our natural resources. The most recent report from the panel of experts convened by the Secretary General of the United Nations in order to analyze the potential and the risk that lies behind these critical minerals shows very clearly that the demand for these critical minerals is going to triple by 2030. And there was also a very clear call from the SG not to repeat the errors of the past that we're all familiar with, of human rights abuses, of environmental degradation, exclusion, and in some cases violence against local communities that paradoxically were the ones who protected and preserved this natural wealth that our continent has. So there are many questions that must be raised so that we can define and redefine this trajectory for growth, or this new trajectory for growth in our region. The most recent report of the UNDP, launched just last week from Trinidad and Tobago with the participation of the First Minister and Minister Smith, who is with us today, raises the need to recalibrate the future of development in our region, starting from the premise that our growth trajectory has four key characteristics. First of all, there was a great deal of progress in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have gone from being a region, a middle-income region, and when there has been profound growth, but very unequal growth. And this has been mixed with a series of crises and shocks that we have been affected by. And this, in turn, brings a great deal of uncertainty, inequality, and this has led growth to a point of stagnation. And it is now extremely vulnerable to suffering setbacks and rollbacks. And this we saw very clearly in the pandemic. Latin America and the Caribbean was the most affected in terms of human development by the pandemic. Value chains were very significantly impacted compared to the rest of the world, and it costed us more to recover after the pandemic compared to the rest of the world. But we have recovered, and we're now at the rate that we were pre-pandemic. And so fundamentally this means that we need to reconfigure this development trajectory. And so The question for us today is, how are we going to do this? So we need to begin with some of the key characteristics of our region, and we need to put this on the table. And this is the fact that Latin America and the Caribbean is the first development region and the most democratic region. We can question the imperfections of democracy, but we must recognize also that democracy means adapting to these constant crises and improving in terms of freedoms and democracy. And as we heard this morning, this means interacting with the private sector. And one of our speakers spoke of the invisible infrastructure that we should take into account. The rule of law, social justice is extremely important for protecting human rights, which is, of course, the core pillar for any democracy, as well as the legitimacy of our democratic institutions and equality within this plurality and this democratically plural system. Today, Latin America and the Caribbean is perhaps the only developing region that has opportunities for such growth. And so we need to think about how we are going to effectively manage all of these resources. And fundamentally, this brings us back to this central question of governance of these critical natural resources. We have 11 principles for good governance, and they can be grouped into 3 key axes. Good governance needs to be effective through public policy, through competencies, and through cooperation in order to implement them. It relies on accountability, responsibility, and inclusivity and participation from multiple stakeholders. Again, this highlights a number of lines of thinking as to how we can manage these critical resources. But before we answer this how, we need to answer the question of why. And multilateralism is being very strongly undermined at the moment, and this invites us to be sure that nationally we're able to translate these major agreements into a vision and to achieve the trajectory that the United Nations, the nations that make up the United Nations, are trying to achieve: economic, environmental, social goals. But the ministers around this table know that it's easy to say, but it's an extremely difficult balance to strike when it comes to decisions in public policy and having a national development strategy that takes us all in the same direction. So it becomes fundamental for the countries of the region and the region as a whole to be able to use dialogue to define a vision and a vocation for our model for development. How can we find the opportunities for growth at a time of fiscal contraction and at a time for Latin America and the Caribbean, and how can we align this with our aspirations to preserve nature? Just to take one example of the tensions that exist, and decision makers are really feeling this pressure between competing agendas, and we have to do so through dialogue. We need to be able to define our vision for dialogue and for development and striking this balance. Failing to do so would not only affect this shared vision that we have for the future, but we can actually see how it's already affecting the stability of our democracies and our ability to trust in our democracy to provide answers for development and, of course, democratic governance. We've seen this in the protests recurring in various parts of the world, and this tension between growth and protection. I think the Minister will agree that protection of biodiversity is good business in and of itself, and perhaps this is something that we can unpack later on. The counterpart to this is actually doing it using dialogue to defend and to build this vocation and to leverage the immense wealth that we have in the region can actually strengthen our democracies and the legitimacy of our institutions by building a joint vision around the wealth that undeniably lies in our continent and in our region. So it's not just about mitigating potential harms on the one hand, but also building confidence and trust and involving the population in this aspirational model for development and using our critical natural resources as a driver for making this vision a reality. So having set the scene, let me say that when we're talking about governance and critical resources, we're also talking about development and democracy. These are two living concepts, living realities that mutually reinforce one another. Democracy and development. Democracy is an end in itself, but it is also a means for achieving development, especially if we understand development as an expansion of freedoms. Democracy being the only system that can truly protect and promises to protect these values of equality and freedom. But democracy is also the only way for legitimacy for democracies in the region. So having said all of that, I want to thank our panelists for being here today, for everything that they've done for democracy and development. So over the years, I want to thank you all for being here in the room, for accompanying us also online, and for supporting the work of the UNDP, and the UNDP having a very clear mandate from the countries of the United Nations to promote democratic governance and sustainable development. And this comes with the support of global experts from all over the world and very concrete tools that our panelists are very familiar with, from biofilm and the climate pledges through dialogues and national dialogue processes and so on. And all of this is made available to you through the wonderful partner that we have in Latin America and the Caribbean, the CAF, the Green Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. I won't step into Christian's shoes. He can present this, but it's been truly excellent what you've done, and you started with an ideal, a profound and shared conviction, which is that Latin America and the Caribbean is a region of opportunity. And as we heard this morning, Latin America and the Caribbean is not part of the problem in the current context. Latin America and the Caribbean is, to a large extent, the solution. It can be a pioneering region that sets the course for this future of development and democracy through multilateralism, which undoubtedly is the only means that we have in order to deal with the common challenges that we are facing as humanity in an increasingly interdependent and interconnected world. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here with us today. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, estimada Michelle.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for those words, which demonstrate the general framework that we have in our region when it comes to opportunities and challenges. And now, moving on, we are going to talk about the importance of providing a context for this discussion. And Christian Asinele, the Executive Vice President for Strategic Programming of the CAF, is going to do that for us. He's going to talk to us about opportunities and challenges in the governance of critical natural resources for development. So go ahead, Christian. Thank you very much. A very good afternoon to one and all. Thank you very much for making the time to be here with us for this panel discussion. What a luxury also to have this opportunity to thank those that are with us, leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean, who are intimately aware of these subjects, because not only have they worked on them, they also have the experience to be able to address them. And, as I always say, paraphrasing a philosopher, experience comes later, it costs a lot, and it is the teacher of the stupid. So I'm going to take advantage of, or we're going to take advantage of the experience of all of those who are here. I think it's important that we all do that because it gives us an opportunity to have a dialogue, which is what we want to achieve with this UNDP CAF conference, which we have been developing over the past 3 years. And it has a characteristic that I think is very interesting, and that is that before coming here to this conference, we had dialogues in various different Latin American and Caribbean countries. It's not just that we've come here to discuss in a panel what we've been thinking about, but rather we generated a dialogue around this that is linked to the strategic objectives that we set ourselves with the subject of governance in general, and we've been addressing various different subjects with various different stakeholders. We had an opportunity to have meetings with young people from Latin America and the Caribbean, with various different local communities, Afro-Indigenous communities, with experts in the area of the environment, and so on. And so that has helped us generate, I would say, a very significant wealth of knowledge when we continue to think about the future, because Michel said this, I think summed it up perfectly. And I'm going to have to tell my team off for making me speak after Michel, because or I have to thank rather my team for doing that, because it really makes it a lot easier, because she has covered all of the subjects very well and with a strategic vision. And it's very complementary to what we do at the CAF as well. I would say that she almost works at the CAF because, well, not quite, but in the last few years we've been working together. I think that we have achieved a significant nexus. The subjects that we're working on, we've been able to address them together, and that has been beneficial for all of us. There's also one word that is very easy to say and very hard to implement, and that's coordination. But I do think that we've had very good coordination with UNDP over these years. With Michel and Sergio, I would just say that he sends his greetings to everyone here participating, but unfortunately with all of the things going on here at the UN, he got caught up in another meeting. But he, together with Michel, are really those responsible for us being here today, and they're the reason why we're able to start thinking about the future of Latin America and the Caribbean, which, as Michel was saying, for our region, that is a future of opportunities and a future of solutions to global problems that we have seen and heard about in various of the many of the statements that have been provided thus far by presidents and heads of state, telling us that we are living in an uncertain world, in a world in which multilateralism, to a certain extent, is being called into doubt. And this year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and the UN system. This could have been a cause for celebration, but we have many wars that are playing out at the moment. And there, Latin America and the Caribbean has an enormous opportunity, as President Lula said this morning in his speech, which is that we have a region of peace that we need to preserve. The problems that we have amongst ourselves, ultimately, when they emerge, they are resolved peacefully. They are resolved through diplomacy, and that means that for trade, and for the question of critical minerals, for everything that has to do with improving quality of life, lowering poverty and inequality levels that our region is experiencing, that has to be a vital precondition for that. And not every region of the world has that. To be able to move forward in this energy transition that's been talked about here, which for us at the CAF, we always stress the fact that it has to be a just energy transition, because the energy transition in the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean is not the same one as the energy transition for more developed countries. I can see our colleague, for our biodiversity and environment director, who's Spanish there. And yes, there has been an understanding and a need to work with all Latin American and Caribbean countries to see how we can work on that transition, because we have these critical minerals, lithium, gas, many energy sources that could help us not only to improve the fiscal situation of countries, which is very important, but also to lower poverty levels, to use those financial, fiscal resources and so on that various countries in the region may acquire to be able to trigger that just energy transition that will allow us not only to work on the environment, but also at the same time to be able to reduce poverty and inequalities, which is something that many, I would say millions of citizens of Latin America and the Caribbean are experiencing. And seeing EPSI, I was reminded, I don't know quite how long ago, but maybe 1 or 2 years ago, we were at the Argentinian Congress in an event, and perhaps I'll let you tell us, of Afro women from all of Argentina, for them to be able to come to the Congress and for the first time sit down on the benches of the Congress to be able to demonstrate and put forward issues of equity and equality. Well, it's a bit of a spoiler, perhaps I'll leave it there. But that's part and parcel of the work that we've been doing with UNDP over the last 3 years. And CAF was doing that beforehand with President Enrique Garcia. But with Michel's leadership, I think that has been rejuvenated so that we have been able to put our foot on the gas. Sergio and I always say that in the CAF, we work at 2 speeds, either fast or very fast. Well, Michel is working even faster than that. But we like to work like that because we know that there's no time to lose. The needs that we have in our region when it comes to water, sanitation, social, education, healthcare needs. Our Director for Social and Human Development is there, our Secretary General Hiroshi, Juan Antonio, who is the reason that I'm here speaking after Michel. Well, we have the whole CAF team here and the whole UNDP team that have been working on this over the preceding years. And they have helped make working together a cornerstone for us being able to think about and rethink these subjects that we are working on. One of those, as Michel said, is the subject of consensus. Consensus is vital, and it has to do with something that is at the very heart of an institution such as CAF, and that is integration, that regional integration that allows us to make progress on these issues of biodiversity, on issues of logistics, of trade, of being able to make the most of what is going to be one of the biggest events we're going to have in our region in the coming days in Belém, the COP. We will have the eyes of the world focused on our region, on Brazil, on Latin America and the Caribbean, and we will have an opportunity, a very big opportunity, to show that in our region we can keep working on environmental issues and that we can have an environmental awareness and environmental conscience that puts us at the forefront of these fundamental issues. You may find many people who do believe or don't believe, but what we do know, as Pope Francis said, and President Lula also quoted him today and reminded me of this phrase, which is that we're all in the same boat. This is the only world we have, and if we don't all take care of it, we know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to send a sort of scaremongering message here, but we do know that if we don't take care of our resources, we will leave succeeding generations with one that is worse than the one that we inherited. And we have that responsibility one way or another. And that responsibility to leave our children and subsequent generations this legacy with what we are experiencing, social networks, artificial intelligence, and so on, this all means that every process is happening much more quickly. We have an opportunity, as Michel said, in a region that has biodiversity, that has water. 30% of the planet's water is in our region. We have that opportunity, but what happens is that there's a lack of something, which Michel also mentioned, that's opportunities, a lack of logistics, infrastructure to be able to distribute those resources evenly among people. There are some in our region who have floods, and at the same time there are other areas of our region that have incredible droughts that last many years. So the weight of that opportunity and being able to seize it is key. above all, particularly when it comes to young people. You have some young people who are talented, but you have them all over the world. Our Secretary General is within the CAF carrying out a project launched by Enrique Garcia on the subject of youth orchestras. And we can see that there are young people that play instruments incredibly well. It doesn't matter whether they come from a rich family or a poor family, wherever they may live in Latin America and the Caribbean. But what is missing, and we know this, are opportunities. And that is where the joint work between CAF and UNDP can make a difference, generating more and better opportunities so that a generation that we have to support and that we have to leave with a better world can develop. And Michel summed this up perfectly, not just develop any old how, but rather to develop in a space in which they have not only opportunities, but in which they also have the sufficient sustainability to be able to deal with the challenges that we are experiencing in this generation. This generation has had to go through a pandemic. Well, when it started, none of us knew what would happen. We were stuck at home. In some countries, it was dealt with one way. In other countries, it was dealt with in another way. But despite the fact that we had a smaller population, we had a much higher percentage of deaths, and that is perhaps due to a lack of integration, perhaps due to regional value chains not being sufficiently developed. We had countries such as Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia that have top-class laboratories, but they're not connected. And so we had to go out and try to find vaccines in Russia, China, the United States, wherever they may have been, in a constant fight over vaccines. That I think many people here work in governments or in organizations will remember that. You'll remember how difficult it was to go out and get those vaccines, and the desperation that many people often felt to try and get vaccines without knowing whether they would be able to get them. Now we have the opportunity, together with UNDP, to be able to work to think about the future, to think about the next pandemics, to think about the problems that we're currently experiencing, and in so doing, to create a better world. That may sound naive, but I think that all of us who are here working in international affairs, in public affairs, in the environment, all of us want to do that and have a vocation for that. And that vocation that we all share is what can take all of us together, as is the slogan this year, to create change, to generate change. And in the CAF, although the core of our work is the subject of infrastructure and logistics and projects to help countries be more competitive, we're also very heavily focused on what we call institutional infrastructure. That is to say, working with young people, capacity building, on governance issues, and strengthening democracy. We are living through difficult times around the world when, as Michel said, although we're doing okay compared to some other countries, there's still a great deal of perception among young people, unfortunately, that democracy is not the system that is delivering the necessary public policies for them to feel good about themselves, to feel like they're keeping up. So we have a great deal of work to do in terms of working with governments, international relations, capacity building, civil society and academia, and we have to shoulder that responsibility. So I'm here to be able to try and benefit from the knowledge and experience of each and every one of you who is on this panel. And so on behalf of Michel and the Executive President of CAF, I would like to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. I know it's perhaps difficult to get in, and I'm sorry about that, but I hope that once you're here, this environment is going to be a conducive one for us to be able to not only listen and think again, but also to have a discussion amongst ourselves about where we want to go next on this subject. So thank you very much. And once again, very good afternoon to all of you.
Muchísimas gracias, vicepresidente.
Thank you very much, Vice President, for inviting us to be aware of the great responsibility that we have to work on a better present to then be able to have an even better future in our region. I would remind you that when we began, we had a little teaser of the video that we put together for this annual conference on governance for development for Latin America and the Caribbean. But there's time for everything, something my mother always used to tell me. So this is the time now that we have for the video that has been put together so carefully for us.
Hay tiempo para todo, lo vamos a ver después. Exacto.
There is indeed time for everything, everything in its time and a time for everything.
Continuar con el diálogo abierto.
Well, with that then, we'll begin with the dialogue on governance of critical natural resources for sustainable development in Latin America and the Caribbean. To lead this conversation, I have the pleasure to present Marcela Rios Tobar, the Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of IDEA International, the former Minister of Justice and Human Rights of Chile, and a recognized specialist in strengthening democracy and governance. Marcela, you have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Claudia.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you also, Michelle, Christian, Sergio, who's not here, but thank you to the CAF and the UNDP for inviting me and inviting IDEA, an institution that, as you all know, is devoted exclusively to promoting democracy and free and fair and transparent elections all over the world. I also want to congratulate you for the effort behind this third annual conference on governance for development. And as Michelle said, this has now become a key moment for building dialogue between key stakeholders across Latin America. This third conference is also dedicated to a vital issue for development of the region, a region that, as Michelle was saying, has two hats, as it were, two identities. It's the most unequal region of the world, but also the most biodiverse region of the world. And we have a wonderful panel here to discuss these issues and how we can address the governance of critical natural resources, water, diversity of species, ecosystems, energy, minerals, key minerals, lithium, copper, and others, and the energy transition, amongst many other things. We have specialists and experts that not only study and analyze these things from a theoretical perspective, but they have enormous experience in developing and promoting public policy and governance and dialogue processes in order to achieve concrete solutions for the sustainable development of the region. So, without further ado, allow me to introduce our first panelist, and I would ask you all to try to limit yourselves to the allotted time. You have around 6 minutes each to deliver your statements, and if we have time at the end, we will have some a round of concluding remarks at the end. So first, I would like to thank His Excellency Minister Juan Carlos Navarro, Minister of the Environment for Panama. In addition to a long-standing career, he's also been a global leader for nature preservation. So thank you very much for being here, sir. And let me begin with a question for you as regards the role and experience of Panama in the sustainable management of resources. Panama is a country that has been a major leader in this area. Participative governance of water with the Panama Canal and that basin. This is an example of good management of natural resources for the betterment of the day-to-day lives of Panamanians. And what do you think we can take from this model that can be applied for the management of critical natural resources, for other resources in Panama as well? We've seen this in the area of conservation and resource management. This is a key question in your country, but more broadly for Latin America and the Caribbean. Minister, you have the floor. Well, I don't... That's all. That's all? Is that all? Let me put this in context. Latin America is a leader when it comes to democracy, peace, biodiversity, water. And now we're starting to be that also in development. But what is governance? If we look to Tocqueville for this, the tyranny of the masses in the 17th century, and we know what happened then. The bloodbath of the French Revolution that some libertarians at the time predicted, and this was going to lead to a military dictatorship, and this is what happened with Napoleon. This led the whole of Europe, not only France, into war. Governance, therefore, has to go hand in hand with democracy. Churchill said that democracy has lots of faults, but it's the best system that we know. We cannot have justice without freedom. And very often this comes with the struggle for resources such as water. Violence and force of one perspective over another. You cannot close down a road when someone's trying to get medical attention. You have to respect people's rights. Peace is fundamentally what underpins all of this. Do dogs have a right to bark? Yes, but they don't have a right to kill. Nobody has a right to impose their will by force. If we're talking about governance, we cannot impose things by force. And this is why it's so important that the UNDP and the CAF have convened this meeting. And I want to thank the CAF for the extraordinary work that they're doing all over Latin America and the Caribbean in the area of the environment. And I thank you also, Michelle, and the UNDP for your extraordinary work. And I would ask all of the panelists to think a little bit about what we are seeing happen across our continent. In Panama, we recently experienced situations of violence because this is about imposing one's will by force. It is not true that a peaceful protest can impose its will by violence, by blocking up a road, destroying means of communication, or burning down a building. This is not a peaceful protest, and it doesn't lead us to governance. So governance has to go another way, the path of dialogue, respecting the rights of others, the path of democracy and freedom. But unfortunately, we're seeing exactly the opposite all over the world. A changing political environment, a new multipolar world is emerging. Today we heard President Lula followed by President Trump. Let us look at this, look at ourselves in the mirror. The world is changing. And what is Latin America going to do in this context? We need to lead as an example of governance and multilateralism, respect for law and for democracy. We must respect freedom. And this is what Latin America and the Caribbean represents. José Molino, President of Panama, was in conversation with Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and he spoke about how important it was for the United Nations and especially for the Security Council having Panama as the President of the Security Council last month, because Panama has become a bridge for consensus. We're not just a bridge for the world in terms of trade, but also a bridge for respectfully achieving consensus. And this is something that we do here in the United Nations, but it is based. It is not. It cannot happen if we undermine our principles and our values. We must be firm. We must, in fact, be inflexible when it comes to defending our values and our principles, beginning with the preservation and conservation of life on Earth and creation itself, not only human life. What gave us the right to eradicate a species? We have no right to destroy creation and to destroy the natural world as ultimately we've been doing. Fundamentally, we are the most destructive species. And ultimately, this reveals a lack of intelligence. we have become the most destructive and fundamentally a suicidal species. Do you recognize your home? We seem to be burning everything down. 8 billion people on the planet, destroying everything around us. Forests, the oceans, destroying food resources from one pole to the other. So our principles are not negotiable. The principle of defending the natural world must be protected. It is non-negotiable. If we all destroy everything around us, we will be destroying ourselves. Let me give you a brief example in Panama. They have the fifth highest level of rainfall in the world. We're not a very big country. We have more than 10,000 species of plants and trees. 1,500 of these come from other parts of the world. Thousands of different species of birds. The Global Bigtail Lab, I saw more than 700 species of bird in just 24 hours. Globally, we're ranked 7th just for the variety of birds. And such a small country. But this is all at risk. In the Panama Canal, we are putting our lives at risk. That water that we take and through the canal that is the backbone of our economy. And so what are we doing to combat this? We're organising things. We're integrating communities. We are listening to communities, ensuring that they are listened to, the Afro-Panamanian and the indigenous communities, to ensure that the canal truly becomes a resource for sustainable development of the world, as it truly is. Let me conclude with this. This is the only path, sustainable development. And this means that we must respect nature. There is no time to lose. If we waste time, there will be nothing left to govern. The biologists and scientists will have to change their profession, and they will become paleontologists looking at extinct dinosaurs.
Muchísimas gracias, Ministro.
Thank you very, very much, Minister Navarro. Thank you. Just a brief taste of the huge diversity that you have in Panama that I've had a brief glimpse of during my time there. We're going to shift now to the Caribbean, and we have with us Senator Dominic Alexander Smith.
I'm going to pose the question in English, so to move along. The minister accompanies us is Minister of Public Administration and Artificial Intelligence from Trinidad and Tobago. Minister, the Regional Human Development Report, UNDP's Human Development Report for this year, notes that 24 countries across Latin America and the Caribbean are already deploying IE in public administrations, with applications ranging from service delivery, economic affairs, to logistics, public order, and crime prevention. Given this scenario, how do you think that governments can harness artificial intelligence to promote innovation and good governance in public administration while ensuring that these technologies build citizens' trust and inclusive service delivery, addressing risks such as digital-enabled bias, systematic discrimination, and the rise of cybersecurity threats? Also in 6 minutes. Thank you.
6 minutes is more than enough time. I want to start by quoting an author that's very familiar with me, Gertrude Stein, and the quote says, "One generation passeth away, but another generation cometh. But the earth abideth forever. The sun also riseth and goeth down again, and hasteth to the place where it arose." And it's very strange coming, and I want to thank Michelle. I want to thank you for allowing me to participate. It's a great honor to be here to represent Trinidad and Tobago at the global stage at what, quite frankly, is a monumental 80th meeting of the UN. And, you know, we have representatives here from CAF. We have many distinguished colleagues. We have many persons of what the society will say provides great importance and provides great expertise, both to our countries locally and also abroad. But the reason I brought up the quote is because we have such a great opportunity. It's very unique that all of us are in the same place at the same time, in the same location. And many times we take for granted the ability and the power of cooperation and of dialogue. And that says, that phrase, it really it resonated with me as I entered the building today, seeing so many diplomats, so many executives, so many leaders in this space. And I said, wow, what a unique opportunity it is for us to really look at what this report speaks to. Under pressure, the world is under quite a bit of pressure. We are challenged and confronted on all fronts, and it will only take a level of resilience and intentional activity to combat all of the challenges that we face as countries, and if we go on the micro level, communities that we represent. And why are we really here? We're really here to represent the people of each country, and in my case, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And so, Michelle, I'm so proud to be a part of the panel. I think my 6 minutes is up. No, so to answer your question, I think there's been so much progress in the Caribbean as it relates to technology and as it relates to artificial intelligence. Uniquely, the ministry that I represent is the first ministry in the Caribbean that has at its front a minister in artificial intelligence. But with artificial intelligence, we know that there is so much risk and there's so much anxiety as it relates to the technology. One thing I want to speak about that the report clearly defines, 26 to 38% of the workforce, of the labor market, will be displaced by artificial intelligence and generative AI. And that is something that is so crucial to small island developing states. When we speak about displacement and when we speak about the workforce, we are a belt, an archipelago that is essentially vulnerable. We're vulnerable to climate change. We're vulnerable to external economies. In our case, in Trinidad, we're vulnerable to the volatility of the oil and gas sector. And so for us, we see artificial intelligence as both potential, but with it comes so much issues as well. Another item which relates to your question is the technology, who owns the technology, and also what percentage is our participation in the technology. And when I looked at the report again, 4.8% of the data centers are housed in the Caribbean. And that in itself, it tells us a story about the ability to have sovereignty with a changing world. And so looking at AI and its implications and the momentum and the progress that countries have been making, I will say progress has started, but we must also think about how do we increase inclusivity as the technology scales. How do we, in as much as possible, create security as well, which is part of the question. And that security really comes from trust. And so the technology must be layered with the element of trust, and the resources that we apply to that really comes from organizations such as CAF and the UN. You play a critical role in how do we embark upon making this transition. In the public service in Trinidad in particular, when we speak about the shared benefit of this potential technology, we're speaking about how does the society benefit in terms of health benefits, roadworks and infrastructure. How do we look at language, plain language assistance in artificial intelligence as well? And importantly, what are the guardrails that we are setting in place as the technology emerges? in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, we have looked at what the benchmarks are globally, and we are very much in tune with listening first and then answering after. And so we've answered the call in Trinidad and in the Caribbean, and we'll continue to answer the call that technology provides. And as we are in this very august chamber, I want us to consider, yes, all of the things that my colleagues have said, but also to suggest that with this new technology and with the way in which we plan to implement the technology, certainly there's a need for us to work together and collaborate as much as possible. And importantly, human insight. Yes, there's an artificial element, but we must also take into consideration the human element of the intelligence. So we have been promoting as much as we can in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago the use of human intelligence as a priority to augment the technology. So I know I'm up on time, but I want to thank you again for the opportunity, Michelle, and hopefully Trinidad can be the lighthouse in the space of artificial intelligence, and we see ourselves as leaders in this space, and we look forward to the global community in supporting us, supporting small island developing states, and supporting the most vulnerable in our societies. Thank you.
Tengo que hacer un desagradable.
I have to make an unfortunate announcement to our panelists. Unfortunately, we're running low on time because we started a little bit late, and so we'll need to be out of the room a little bit earlier than we hoped. So I'm going to have to ask, I'm being told I'm going to have to cut down your presentations to 4 or 5 minutes at the most so that we can wrap up. So with that said, I would like to apologize to my friend Epsi Campbell, the former Vice President of Costa Rica and now Honorary President of the Center for Sport and Human Rights. She's a Costa Rican and a leader in the region in the defense of human rights, gender equality, the inclusion of Afro-descendant communities, and it's a great honor to have Epsi with us here on this panel. Madam ex-Vice President, I would like to ask you, Costa Rica has been recognized globally as a country that has put the restoration and sustainable development at the heart of its development. You have experience in conservation that has been awarded with international prizes, and during your time in government, an innovative program called More Women, More Nature was adopted, and that program strengthens the role of women in the conservation of biodiversity and includes a new generation of payments for ecosystem services, a thematic bond for protected areas, among other things. And so I'd like to ask you to share with the panel what role can rural communities, indigenous populations and Afro-descendant populations and women play in governance systems for natural resources. Epsi. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Marcela. I would like to begin by greeting the Regional Director of UNDP, Michelle. I'd like to thank Chris, the Vice President of the CAF. Thank you very much, and my thanks to Sergio as well, and to all of the eminent panelists that are participating in this important dialogue. I would like to also thank you sincerely, because this is a space for building upon, and there are a lot of people behind the scenes that organized this, that sent out the invitations, and they are never seen, but they're the reason why we're here. So I wanted to take that opportunity to thank them. And I also wanted to acknowledge in this room the significant participation of women. If you look around you, you'll realize that there very much is a majority of women, and that also indicates that we're on the track to continuing to advocate for power and responsibility in a mindset of building parity-based democracy. We have a crucial task before us today, the governance of natural resources and critical minerals for sustainable development, at a time when the planet is forcing us to think not only about environmental sustainability, but also about the sustainability of our life on the planet. indigenous and Afro-descendant communities and women have historically been the custodians of the earth, water, forests, and however, all too often they have been excluded from decision-making about those self-same resources that they have protected. And that has been the case for generations. And that exclusion is not only inefficient, it's also dangerous if what we're thinking about is the preservation of those resources. Allow me very rapidly to provide an example. Marcela was telling us a little bit about the More Women, More Nature program. That's a program for payment for environmental services to women, those women who are the guardians of nature. But I really wanted to very quickly tell you about the experience of the Cahuita National Park in Costa Rica. There, the Afro-descendant community has been proactive in the innovative co-governance model in which the state and the community work together to protect biodiversity, to guarantee the sustainability of tourism, and to also recognize the cultural value of those that live on and take care of that land. It shows us that when communities are recognized as partners and not spectators, conservation can be strengthened and the benefits are distributed better. I would also like to make sure that we don't lose sight of how, in our region of Latin America and the Caribbean, we are experiencing a profound economic and social crisis, persistent poverty and inequality like open wounds, environmental degradation, which is a threat to water, food and energy security, and the impacts of climate change are increasingly strongly affecting those that contribute to the problem the least. All of this is taking place in the context of structural inequalities, gender equalities, racial inequality, inequality between urban and rural areas. And this requires us to think about making sure that we don't continue to worsen exclusion, marginalization, poverty, labor precarity, and a lack of access to resources such as land and other financial resources, including technologies related to the new way of organizing resources. And for that to happen, we need to have a deep-rooted change, and I'll go straight to the recommendations. First of all, we must recognize the rights of communities and women to participate fully and bindingly in decisions about the use and management of resources. Secondly, we must guarantee that the benefits derived from the use of those resources is distributed in a just way, prioritizing investment in education, healthcare, and well-being for those that protect those territories. Third, we must promote co-governance models between communities, the state, and local governments to safeguard the most critical resources that we need. And always thinking in this mindset of dignity and rights for all persons. And I'd like to conclude this message with a note of hope and commitment. The future of our region requires transformative partnerships and the full proactive participation of communities, indigenous women, rural women, in the distribution of power within a robust democracy. We need new transformative and compassionate leadership that takes care of resources of people, that cooperates, that guarantees rights and dignity for all persons, leadership that redistributes power, the private power and public power, and which redistributes resources, that opts for plural democracy with representation and participation from all people of all identities, ethnic, gender identities, of various different age groups, and a model that provides reparation, accountability, that includes reparatory justice, and which recognizes that discrimination must be eradicated, that racism and discrimination against women have no place in Latin America. In sum, a model of dignity and sustainability, because we are part of a global tribe, united by the shared responsibility to take care of resources, to care for the planet, to care for people. And today, more than ever, we need to act based on the principle of Ubuntu. I am because we are. That is the compass that will allow us to build a future of hope, solidarity, and genuine justice for everyone. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very, very much, Epsy Campbell, for those words. Let me now move to introduce Senator Cecilia Requena, who's joining us from Bolivia. Senator Requena has been Secretary of the Committee on the Environment, Biodiversity, the Amazon, Protected Areas and Climate Change in the Senator's Chamber. She's now a recognized leader defending the Amazon and its protection. You've played a critical role in governance, especially management of natural resources and others. What do you think are the most urgent measures from a legislative perspective that need to be undertaken to guarantee governance, to ensure sustainable development and management of critical natural resources, ensures that it is inclusive and sustainable in the long term? Thank you. It's a real honour to be part of this panel. Thank you to the UNDP and the CAF and to your teams who have made it possible for us to be here. We know that you've always got our backs in this fight for the environment. I want to touch on a number of things. I'm going to mention a number of challenges, and I think we are facing a civilizational challenge. We haven't been able, I mean, obviously there are some exceptions with the indigenous communities, but overall we haven't been able to build without destroying everything along the way. We're seeing this in climate change. The populations are losing out in our region, which is the most biodiverse, as we've heard, where losing parts of the Amazon, other forests, the rainforests and so on. So there is a worrying reality. It's not just an administrative problem. I do believe it goes a little bit deeper than that. We only have a few minutes, so I can't go too much into it, but someone was saying that given the limits of nature, and nature has its limits, we have ingenuity and creativity.
Bueno, justamente a Mozart le presentaron un texto.
We're limited, but there are wonderful things you can do even within these limits. But recognizing the limits that we have will actually help us to generate this capacity to reinvent and to be creative. And we have this challenge, a cognitive one of imagination, because it seems that we have evolved in order to address very concrete challenges and these very complex processes that are taking place very, very slowly, very gradually over many years, are very difficult for us to grasp. We need to keep going. And as humanity, we haven't truly been able to grasp what is happening, how grave what is happening actually is. But we also need imagination to imagine a better world. We're also facing a historic challenge with poly-extractivism. This is the mark left by colonialism, centuries of colonialism that, again, we have to, it's been holding us back. It hasn't allowed us to move forward and tackle things head on. Extractivism is being connected with the criminal communities, the criminal networks across the region, and this is something that we're also seeing very clearly. These are also challenges. A third challenge I want to mention is this way, this form we have of economic growth. In Bolivia, there is, you can make more money by clearing a forest, but there's no comparison between the value of of having the forest. So it seems that all paths are leading us straight into disaster. We have no way of showing and revealing the value of what lies beneath these wonderful resources that we have in Latin America. But unfortunately, our systems don't allow us to visualize them. We need to move beyond GDP. We need better indicators for human and other forms of development. In relation to minerals, gold, what is happening with gold in the Amazon region? Gold, rare earths increasingly are being extracted by international demand, and our institutions, our people, simply don't have the capacity to struggle against this to ensure that it doesn't have a devastating effect. And I'm now going to move to a few proposals, and I think in order to tackle this, integration is absolutely essential. And I can tell you, based on my own experience, that without democracy, when democracies are weak, it's extremely difficult to fight for human rights or for the rights of species. Really, democracy is the counterpart to this struggle, but we need to move significantly towards this vision that was so eloquently described by Michel earlier. The interests and the opportunities that we have before us are truly wonderful, and we should capitalize on them. I know that I'm running out of time. In the region, we have examples like Costa Rica, with its economic diversity, Uruguay with its energy transition, and other examples as well. We really have wonderful examples of progress, and we talk about the executive and civil society, but actually parliaments can do a great deal more if we integrate and work together. We can be very flexible, we can collaborate with other parliaments, we can work with different agencies if we do so, and we can move forward with a shared vision to ensure that another Latin America is possible.
Ana Carolina y Andrés.
Thank you. Ana Carolina and Andrés, I'm afraid I'm going to leave you with 2 minutes each, and I would ask you, please forgive me, but we do have to wrap up. So Ana Carolina and then Andrés.
Thank you very much to Marcela, the CAF and the UNDP for this invitation to talk about a subject which we think is very important in the institutional governance of natural resources. We work in more than 13 countries that produce hydrocarbons and minerals, and we indeed believe that, and this is my first message, one, Latin America is at a turning point. Latin America already is the country that provides 35% of lithium consumed in the world, 40% of copper, 60% of the reserves of lithium, and enormous potential in other minerals as well. Undoubtedly, this is an opportunity because many of the countries in the region are thinking about this opportunity in different ways, trying to escalate move up the value chain, trying to think about the processing of those minerals, green reforms based on those minerals. But we know there are many risks. We know, for example, in the case of Chile, 80% of copper extraction is done with significant water usage. We also know that the expansion of copper also is overlapping with forests in various countries, and 60% of mineral potential overlaps with territories that are close to or belong to indigenous communities. So it's not an insignificant risk. And if we add on top of that the fact that one of the main resources that has been used for Latin America and the Caribbean's development, which is oil, in the case of many economies, may start to see a reduction in its global demand, that also exposes those economies in Latin America to have to think about the transition, particularly in those oil-producing regions that are not only going to see economic risks and the loss of tax takings, but also they're going to see environmental assets being left behind in some case. So it's not easy. We believe that what we need to think about now is how can we turn this transition towards clean energies into a transition to development. And that's what we've been talking about in terms of sustainable development and inclusive development. And for us, governance lies in the response to that question. And this will be my final message. Governance, for me, takes the form of 1, robust regulatory frameworks, 2, access to civic participation with conducive environments for civic participation, the better distribution of benefits, not only rents, revenues, but also the introduction of those minerals in the value chains, and a much more influential and decisive voice in at the international level for Latin America. And there are current initiatives such as the UN panel or initiatives of UNEA, where there are attempts to think about mineral chains, the traceability of minerals, and Latin America has to weigh more heavily in those international arenas. Thank you.
Well, I am going to attempt Mission Impossible and say a couple of things in 60 seconds. Firstly, I'd like to thank the UNDP and the CAF. If we had to summarize this panel in one word, how is Latin America transforming this curse of natural resources into a blessing? Well, this means helping the economy grow, looking after the environment, and reducing poverty. So we've already mentioned the wealth of resources that we have had traditionally, but this hasn't helped us reduce poverty. Further, between 2020 and in 2013, the prices went through the roof, but growth didn't grow like that. The industrial capacity of all countries except Mexico actually fell during this time. We cannot allow this to happen again. So what should we do? We have a new wave of natural resources, as we've just heard, lithium and nickel, and there they are. But there are things that we didn't have before that we do have now. We have cheap and the cleanest and cheapest energy in the world. This is a massive competitive asset for industries, for all industries, and fundamentally for the industries of the future. Everything that has to do with data requires water, which we have, and we also have huge quantity of energy. So we have these new inputs that didn't exist before. And so what we need to do, and I know that the CAF is on top of this, we must optimize the energy assets of the region. For instance, our energy grids, our electricity grids are not connected. Secondly, we must invest in innovation and intelligence. But this is dependent on having a return on the investment. This is something we can already do, connecting universities and businesses to make progress. And finally, something that we are working on at the Ibero-American Secretariat, all of the countries in the region have an idea as to how they should attract investment. And this is linked to legal security, regulatory frameworks and other such things. But what no one has thought of up until now, I believe, and this is what we're pushing for, is that there hasn't been a regional policy for attracting foreign investment. If an investor talks about Peru or Chile or Panama, these are small countries. There are only 4 big countries: Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia. But if we were able to, and this is what we're trying to do at SEGIB, if we could build this idea of having a regional policy, a single regional policy to attract foreign direct investment, this could really change things. And for this, we need the CAF and the UNDP. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much to each and every one of you. I hope that you have a pleasant continuation of your Tuesday.
Está bien, lo hiciste súper. Tenían un guión así como de preguntas. Está bien. Así. Secretario, buenas tardes. ¿Te gusta? ¿Puedo robar? Ya, déjame hablar con Cristiana. Sí.